Thank you, everyone, for coming to my session on bulletproofing your data guard. For the next hour, I'm going to go talk about the latest and greatest new features of data guard, but also go through how we can protect ourselves by leveraging a lot of the best practices that many people in the industry practice today. Before I begin, a little bit about myself. My name is Charles Kim, and I'm an Oracle ACE Director. I'm also the founder and president of Viscosity North America. I've been doing Oracle since 1991. I was fortunate to land a really big Oracle deployment with a company called Nortel, and we had literally 50 plus consultants working on a project, and of which a lot of them were for Oracle. And when the project ended, the people that I was working with just basically asked me to come join them at Oracle, and that's where my career continued. I do a lot of database upgrades, a lot of data integration between Oracle, different versions to heterogeneous databases, from Oracle to SQL, SQL to Oracle, leveraging both SharePlex and Golden Gate. I've been doing SharePlex since like 1999 and Golden Gate since like 2005. So I've been around the block a little bit on those technologies. I'm also the president of the IOEG Cloud SIG, and with it have authored the Oracle Cloud Book, and we do a lot of cloud workshops all over the country. And I'm also certified in little things like Exadata, RAC, and Oracle Management Cloud. I also have written about 9 books, and my passions are in the world of Exadata and implementing RAC. And nowadays, it's all about being the autonomous database. I try to automate just about everything I do. I write tons of shell scripts across to automate database provisioning, to even like data guard. I'll share with you scripts that I've written for the data guard book, and to help you automate and also monitor your data guard environment. Go through this real quick here. This little screen over here, basically, it's from 2016. But if you look at like WhatsApp section, right? They do 44.4 million transactions in a 60-second period in a single minute. Just like Facebook, you can see there's 3.3 million transactions in a single minute. And if you talk about how do these companies protect their data, right? It's hard to do it with your traditional storage level replication, but this is where technologies like DataGuard really comes in handy. All right, so I'm also the author of the DataGuard Handbook with Larry Carpenter, and we haven't revised the book in a while, but I have written in Q1 of last year a deep dive that's specific for 12 new features, and has a lot of the internals around leveraging 12 new features specifically for DataGuard, and it's on Viscosity's website. Jim Kaczynski and I last year wrote a little pocket reference guide talking about leveraging pluggable databases and doing zero downtime migrations to Oracle Cloud, and talking about how to deal with security, TDE wallets within Oracle Cloud as well. Right. Also, for those who are coming to Open World, I have a session on 12.2 and 18c new features, and it'd be really good for those who are coming to come see me, and let's get connected there. This screen is a little bit about all the sessions that we've done. This is for the last quarter of 2017. As you can see, Viscosity does a ton of sessions, but the more important ones, since I am sharing with the folks in Australia and New Zealand, the lines that you see in green, those are webinars. And so if you are interested, shoot me an email, find me on Twitter, and I'll send you the links. And we have a common landing page called viscosityna.com/events. And that events page talks about all of our on-site events as well as our webinars. All right, so like I mentioned before, for our DataGuard book, I have released a toolkit, which basically goes through the entire provisioning, monitoring, maintenance, leveraging scripts, doing on-demand backups and restores to set up DataGuard, and leveraging the broker, et cetera, et cetera. And that's available on these two websites that you see here. Okay, just going through the books I've written. For those who are interested in a Kindle version of our cloud book, let me know and we'll shoot you a copy. And let's get started. All right, so as you know, this title also has a little bit about cloud as well. And so both 2 and as well as 18C, right, was born in the cloud, or what they say is it's cloud first. So all of Oracle's future direction is that every new release of Oracle is going to come out in Oracle Cloud first. And eventually, and from the looks of it, it's going to be anywhere between 5 to 6 months. And at least that's been the pattern with 12.2 and 18C. It becomes available on to the rest of the community. One thing to note is that as Oracle does provide new releases, specifically they proved this out in 18C, when it came out in the cloud, it became immediately available on their engineer systems. And so on the ODA and on the Exadata, it was immediately available for 18C for those platforms. All right, so this is just to show you that 18C is downloadable and available for Linux. And so why is DataGuard so important for the cloud? And so the most common use case for DataGuard in the cloud is to take your on-premise database and leverage Oracle Cloud as your DR. And so you can actually think of Oracle Cloud as a remote data center if you want, but one of the easiest use cases for leveraging Oracle Cloud is to leverage it for disaster recovery. And the same thing goes for performing backups on-premise, and you can replicate that through object storage, or better yet, you can leverage the Oracle Database Backup Cloud Service, and from on-premise, be able to back up your databases directly to Oracle Cloud. And basically what that does is that it leverages Oracle Cloud and makes Oracle Cloud look like a tape device on-premise. And so I do have a session with you guys, I think in a few weeks, specifically on backing up your databases to Oracle Cloud. All right, so also, if you are a consumer of Oracle Cloud, right, in one of the provisioning screens, you have the option to specify that you want this database to be protected with DataGuard, okay? And so what that basically means is that you have that from a standby database configuration perspective, right, if you choose for high availability, right, your standby database will be provisioned in a different availability domain, and also for disaster recovery, your DataGuard database will also be placed in a different data center. Right. So also from a DR option perspective, right? If you choose the Enterprise Edition service or the High Performance service, you'll just get DataGuard, the same DataGuard that you enjoy today in on-premise, the Enterprise Edition. However, if you choose the Extreme Performance or the Exadata service, right, you'll leverage the Active DataGuard as part of your service. Right. So also in Oracle Cloud, right, you have access to the dbcs CLI, and leveraging the dbcs CLI, you can perform a lot of the DataGuard operations directly from there, such as switchover, failover, getting status of your DataGuard environment, right? And so the diagrams that you see here also depict ways you can actually replicate your database to Oracle Cloud and establish a physical standby. So Oracle released, for example, in September 18th of 2016, they announced that 12CR2 is going to be available, but it's only going to be available in Oracle Cloud, right? And then approximately 6 months later, on March 1st, they announced that it'd be available to the general public. And so, again, why is this important, right? And as I talk about patching and talk about release updates, right? Those are critical key performance indicators and actually success factors to a lot of the data guard environments. And so, if you're in an earlier release in 12.2, it's all about applying PSUs, right? PSUs for security as well as PSUs for bug fixes, right? However, if you're on 12.2, it's all about applying release updates and release update revisions. And being caught up in those patches will enable you to be effective in deploying a successful data guard environment. Okay, so now we're in the world of 18C. For those who don't know, Oracle has changed their versioning schemes. And so instead of being 12C R2, now it's called 18C. Okay, and so with 18C, we'll have a 3-digit format going forward for the database version. It'll be the year that the database is released and the update and the revision number. So update being a release update and the revision number being the actual tracking of the revisions for each release update. So Oracle also announced that with each update, they will only have 3 revisions as well. Okay, so if you look at this chart here, you can see that the months are skewed a little bit because this isn't the exact version as it goes, right? You'll see that 18.2.0, 18.3.0, 4.0 every quarter will increment. However, for 18.2, it'll be 18.2.1 and 18.2.2, right? And then same with 18.3.1, 18.3.2. And that's how the versions are going to go forward, right? So in 3 years, we might see 18.12, but also you'll see Oracle 20C as well, all right? So as we talk about 18C and 19C and 20C, I mean, you can see that 18C is really Oracle 12.2.02. 19C is really 12.2.03. And so from a design perspective, 20C will really be what Oracle has really intended to be 13C or whatever they were going to call it, right? And so also, as you know, 12.2, just like 11.2, is the terminal release as well, right? Thus, you see the extended support. Right, so also from a support perspective, and I'll be real quick with this. For those who are not aware, right, that 12.1, if you're on 12.1, right, the premier support ends on July 2019. If you're on 11.2, right, your premier support ends at the end of this year, right? That means that after this year, you have to buy extended support to be able to download patches, right? So basically, it means that once you start going to extended support, you have to pay an extra 10% for that year for licensing and for support licensing, that is. And year 2 and year 3, you're paying an additional 20%. Okay, so for those who are not aware, that you're not paying the extra 10% and 20% just in that one database that you haven't converted over to 12.2 or 18C, you're paying an extra 10% and 20% for your entire contract. Okay, so a lot of people seem to be confused about that. So I want to make that clear. As we talk about 18C, right, and you'll see a lot of and hear a lot about the Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud, right? And so the Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud and a lot of the Oracle offerings in their cloud, right? It has an option for data guard as well. And so, and things like the Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud, it's built on the foundation of 18C, Exadata, artificial intelligence, machine learning, right? And it's optimized for, obviously, for the Data Warehouse Cloud. And you'll also hear announcements about the OLTP cloud as well coming up soon, right? So Why is 18C known and new features relevant for us? It's because there's a lot of enhancements in 18C and 12.2 that will actually simplify and make our lives easier as we implement DataGuard. So in 12.2, one of the new features that Oracle added was the ability for us to have what we call a subset standby for pluggable databases. So if you're leveraging the multi-tenant option, right, you have the option to protect just one or more of your pluggables. So if you have 100 PDBs within a single CDB, right, in 12.2, you can say, I only need to protect 2 of those PDBs, right, and set up DataGuard accordingly, right? However, from a switchover perspective, right, Oracle didn't provide the mechanism of performing a switchover at the PDB level. Switchover happened at a failover perspective. So from a pluggable database perspective, we didn't have the option to actually switch over and switch back. Prior to 18C, we only have the capability to fail over to our DR site, right? So in 18C, now we have the capability to perform a switchover and switch back as well, okay? Also in 12.2 and now it's enhanced in 18C, right? No logging data transactions in the primary. You do not have to go push up those data files on your DataGuard environment. Now, when you have no logging activities in your primary database, you can actually go from the DR site, at least in 12.2, right? Have it synchronize back all the corrupt blocks. Now that's automatically propagating as of 18C. Okay. Also, I mentioned earlier before, right, you have the option to specify a DataGuard configuration, right? By default, in the Autonomous Data Warehouse class, for example, provides you 99.95%, right? By leveraging DataGuard, right, Oracle is going to give you the extra 9. So if you look at it from a protection perspective, right, 99.95% is 4 hours and 38 minutes of downtime per year. However, the extra 9, right, shrinks that significantly down to 26 minutes of downtime per year, right? It's literally from 21 minutes per month down to 2 minutes per month, right? And so by choosing the option to protect your database, right, with DataGuard, it gives you the extra 9. Okay, so let's talk about patching, right? I mentioned PSUs are very important. I also mentioned release updates and release update revisions are very important, right? If you're talking about having a stable DataGuard environment, right, being relevant, being current on your PSUs and release update revisions, right, is a critical factor for success, right? So prior to 12.2 or Oracle 12CR2, right, we're still talking the world of PSUs. Starting in 12.2 and above, now, right, now we're talking about release updates and release update revision, right? So, and another general recommendation that I tell a lot of our customers is that when you're applying patches, right, apply patches in an N-1 fashion, meaning that, you know, you can be the first person to apply the latest patch day one, you know, when it comes out, but, you know, maybe in July, you may want to be implementing the April patch, all right? So the first release update came out in July of last year, and now we're at least, July, at least 4 or 5 release updates now, right? So in 11.2, right, Oracle announced a concept of first patch apply. What this basically is that it gives us the capability to apply a PSU and now a release update revision on the standby database, perform a switchover, and then apply the same PSU on the primary database and switch back, right? So basically, the key concept of a switchover is zero data loss, right? And zero downtime, right? Or, you know, very minimal quiescing of a downtime to achieve our switchover activities, right? Let's look at some of the history of DataGuard, right? So I've been doing DataGuard since not data guard per se, a hot standby since 7.3, right? And since then, we've tried to automate a ton of the data physical standby perspective, right? And in 8i, Oracle gave us the concept of a read-only physical, and the whole MRP, the automation of recovery. And in 9i, logical standby became really popular, and Oracle introduced the concept of a switchover failover. We used to be able to do that same concept in 8i. There was a lot of scripting we had to do, copying of the control files back and forth, but 9i automated a lot of that. Oracle introduced gap resolution, cascading redos with cascade standbys, and literally, right? One of the most popular features, active data guard, right? It is a licensed option, but however, I have the capability to have my standby database up and running, applying archive logs in read-only mode, and I can actually use it for a reporting database, right? Also in 11G, they introduced the concept of compressed redo. Basically, Oracle will compress the redo logs before it sends it over to the target, significantly decreasing my need for high capacity networks between my primary and my standby database. Also in 11G, they introduced the concept of a snapshot standby. This is where you can go from read-only and convert to a read-write database and flash back your database and continue your data guard replication. So it was very popular in 10.2, but we had to do a lot of, not a lot, but additional steps to be able to convert our standby database to make it read-write, so we can do things like hot fixes or performance testing, right? And then when we're done with our testing, we had the option to flash back the database to a guaranteed restore point and re-enable replication. So in 11G, they've automated a lot of that for us, right? Also in 11G, they introduced the concept of a transient upgrade, where you can actually, or Oracle will actually convert the physical standby to a logical for the duration of the upgrade, right? And also in 11G, they introduced the concept of a duplicate from active database. This is where you don't have to take a database backup on the primary site to be able to create a standby database, okay? Now let's jump into 12CR1, right? 12CR1 introduced the concept of a far sync. So it became really popular because now I can actually guarantee zero data loss, right? And yet achieve a wide area network physical standby. So what does that mean? A far sync instance is nothing more than being able to copy your control file, SP file, and running a set of background databases, background processes, right? And far sync is nothing more than a propagator of our archive logs, right? However, I can go from a primary database to a far sync instance. The keyword is instance, not a database. There's no database files in the far sync instance, right? And I can go synchronous, right, between my primary and my far sync. And from my far sync instance, I can go async to my DR site. Okay, so a very common use case is to have a far sync instance locally right next to my primary database, right? And on a separate server to protect it from the primary database, but also on two separate storage to even survive a storage failure on a different network, right? But however, since I'm right there, right, I can replicate archive logs, really redo, right, synchronously, and from there I can go async to wherever I want. So that became really popular in 12.1. However, it does require a license of Active Data Guard, right? Fast sync is a new feature that they added. Basically, is from the primary database as it writes from what used to be LNS to what's called now NSA or NSS, depending on whether if you're asynchronous or if you're synchronous, right? How that process used to write or send data, redo data to RFS process in the standby database, right? And the RFS process would actually write that information to the standby redo logs, right? And so, and that would be the no affirm part. So we would actually skip the write from RFS to standby before it sends the acknowledgement back to the primary database. And so that is called FastSync, right? So it eliminates the write to RFS on the standby database side, right? And also in 12C, they improve the broker switchover enhancements so that, for example, if the switchover failed, you can fix where the problem lies and issue the switchover command again. They also introduced the sysdg role. It's clear delineation of roles and responsibilities. So you can have a separate person. All this person does is data guard administration. So Oracle's trying to be more secure in their configuration, and so that not every administrator leverages a sysdba role, right? So also in 12C, they gave us the capability to leverage sequences on the active data guard. So the same rules that apply for rack apply for data guard, meaning that the performance characteristics of sequences also apply to data guard as well. That means that you should leverage caching and no order as well. And so if you are, like, for example, have a very high sequence retrieval rate, you may need to increase your cache from the default to, let's say, 1,000 or 10,000 or even higher as well. Okay. Also in 12C, if you do an alter database move on the primary, it no longer impacts the standby. Also, you can, as a feature of 12C as well, you can actually issue the move data file command, right? And it'll actually move the data file for you from source to ASN disk group to the target ASN disk group, right? Previously, the way that we move data files were literally, right? You would take the data file offline, copy the file, and put it online. And as part of putting the data file back online, you may need to recover that data file. Now you can do the whole thing with a single command, and it does not impact data guard. Also, if you're leveraging active data guard, right, you can actually perform DML on temporary tables. Continuing on, the resumable switchover, like I mentioned before, right? You issue the switchover command. Let's say something fails, right? You can actually fix what was broken and issue the switchover command again, and it'll resume where it left off. Okay. Also, when we started managed recovery, we used to always say using current log file, right, for real-time apply. Now that's default. That's of 12C. Okay, and also from a incremental update perspective, right? Now I can use the TNS in the standby database to perform an incremental update from my primary database. So let me take one step back and give you a use case for that, right? A common misconception that every DBA, not every DBA, a lot of DBA seem to have is that if I lose archive logs before they are applied on my standby database, that I must rebuild my standby. Okay, and so that's quite not true. And in fact, one of the most popular ways to get past missing archive logs, or if you have archive logs that you need to catch up for, let's say, days, right? And you can't, and you need to be able to apply them really quick. A faster method is to actually go figure out what the SCN number is on the standby database, go back to the primary, right, and perform a database backup as of the SCN, right, and from there ship the backup to the standby with a standby control file backup, and from there do a recover, right, of the standby database. Okay. However, if you heard all those steps that I mentioned before, right? It could be quite a bit of steps. Now in 12C, I can be in the standby database and with a single command say recovery database as from the SCN. And so now they allow that capability, simplifies that action. So we mentioned earlier the FARSync instance, right? So in one data center, in this case, New York, right? I leverage the synchronous redo transport, right? And from there it goes to my FARSync instance. And if you wanted to completely have additional level of protection, you put your FARSync instance on different servers, and even different storage, right? So it gives you fault tolerance at the compute level, as well as fault tolerance at the storage level, right? Obviously, it won't give you fault tolerance from a data center perspective, but how often do you lose data centers versus losing storage versus losing compute, right? And from the FARSync instance, I can go async to anywhere in the world, right? And so the whole idea is that in the event, if I lose my primary database, that data is already copied over and propagated to my FARSync instance. And eventually, it'll be caught up to my standby database. Okay, so here's another depiction of what that looks like, right? To create a FARSync instance is literally creating a backup of a control file, right? As a FARSync instance control file. You ship that to your server where we're going to be instantiating FARSync with the SP file, with a password file, and you'll literally start shipping over redo. Okay, so mentioned earlier the sysdg role. Here's all the permissions that go with it, and as you can see in the very bottom, DataGuard broker should use sysdg as well. Okay, and so here's a data broker command, set of data broker commands, right, to be able to leverage the FARSync instance. I'm not going to go through everything, but the most important part is that we will be leveraging redo routes to specify the source and the target. All right, so let's talk about 12.2 new features, right? In 12.2, with DataGuard broker now, I can do block comparisons between my primary database and my standby, and I could even do recovery of corrupted blocks. Also, prior to 12.2, if you were to use fast start failover, we only had the concept of a single observer. As of 12.2, we can have multiple observers. Okay, so basically what it is that doesn't really change much from a having, so we don't have 3 observers that are all active. We have 1 primary and basically equivalent to 2 standbys, right? So in the event the master dies, right, one of the slaves will become the new observer, right? So that's a new feature in 12.2. I can also have multiple failover targets now, and my fast start failover can be enabled for maximum protection mode as well. The support for transparent destinations for different Indianness leveraging ZDLRA. That's not really a 12.2 feature, but it's a new feature they put into the ZDLRA. It just happened to come out at the same time. Also, from an in-memory perspective, right, I can have a different in-memory configuration for my active data guard. So I could even offload even more reports leveraging active data guard. Right, so I can have one group of tables that are in memory on my primary, and I can have different group of tables that are in memory for my standby, right? So for those who are leveraging pluggable databases, you can do now AWR at the PDB level, but also I can actually, if I'm leveraging Active Data Guard, right, I can do diagnostic pack and tuning pack on my Active Data Guard instance as well. So also in 12.2, I can create a standby database leveraging dbca, right? So it's not the dbca GUI yet, but at least dbca in silent mode, I can create a standby database. And so for those who are who do struggle with the instantiation of DataGuard, Oracle simplifying that as well, and simplifying obviously the manageability of that as well. Also in 12.2, there's a concept called Mira, multi-instance redo apply. Prior to 12.2, only a single instance of a rack configuration could do redo apply. Now in 12.2, one or more, or one or all even, right, of the instances in rack can apply redo. And so it makes more sense if you have a active data guard in the same data center that your primary databases, and you're using it, let's say, for example, to truly offload reporting capabilities, right? Now that active data guard can really keep in sync with the primary database. And obviously it doesn't really make sense to do multiple instance redo apply if you're on, across shipping data across a wide area network, right? Like I mentioned before, I can have subset standbys if I'm doing pluggable databases. And now also in 12.2, I can do guaranteed restore points at the pluggable level as well. Also in 12.2, if you update the sys password, that password will automatically get propagated to your standby. Basically, that password change just becomes an entry in redo as well now. I can even do a duplicate database to create a FARSync instance now. And for DataGuard Broker, a lot of the SQL Plus commands that I use in SQL Plus are applicable for the DataGuard Broker as well. I just mentioned that we can do DataGuard instantiation with dbca, and here basically the options, right? The create as standby and leveraging the DB unique name. And I don't even need a TNS names at all, because now I can use Easy Connect, right? And I have the option to even specify custom scripts to execute as a post event for dbca. Okay, so here's an example of the actual dbca command. Dbca silent, create duplicate DB, et cetera, and create a standby database, and you'll actually see it going across. So mentioned earlier, Mira, no logging, right? No logging blocks are recorded in the control file in the physical standby, and I can leverage the rman command, right, to recover no log blocks. And so now it's simplifies the no logging activity recoverability substantially. And from a Mira perspective, right, I can run redo apply on some or all those standbys. We just don't get control over where it happens. You can only specify it as in the form of an integer. Right. So if you happen to be leveraging subset standbys, there's a in the .org parameter called enabled pdbs on standby, and you literally list the name of your standbys. And since the number of standby databases increased drastically from 12.1 to 12.2, now we can have 4,096 pluggable databases, right? Oracle is providing also the capability to use wildcards as you specify the databases, PDBs in this case, right? Mentioned the ZDLRA. Now I can actually do redo transport to different endianness through the ZDLRA, right? So this could be huge as you're talking about going to AIX to Linux, right? Now you can actually do propagation of redo, right? Or archive logs through the ZDLRA. Okay. In memory, through Active Data Guard, like I mentioned before, I can have a different in-memory configuration for Active Data Guard from the source. And now think about, as Oracle talks about, memory is 100 times faster. I can even get more value of my standby database. It's all about total cost of ownership and doing a ROI in terms of the investments that companies make for their data guard environment. So my next screen that I'm about to show is my top 12 data guard failures, and we can literally just have a full hour session just on this one screen alone. But for sake of time, we'll go through this as fast as we can. But here's basically, my top 12 problems that I see when I go to consulting engagements, right? First one, like I mentioned before, right? There's a lot of misconceptions that people have when it comes to, if you have accidentally deleted your archive logs, right, prior to it being shipped or archived on the standby, right, that there's a conception that DBAs have that you got to rebuild, right? But at the same time, right, on the primary database, if my archive file system or my disk group where my archives are at fill up to be 100%, right? It's you can not easily, but it is error prone for people to actually delete the actual archive log because not everybody maintains archive logs through RMAN, right? And so they'll go in through ASMCMD, do an RM star, boom, and guess what happens, right? So another one is that when people create data files for rack environments, they forget the plus sign, right? So that data file will actually go to Oracle Home DBS where it's not shared, and the other rack nodes will start complaining about not having access to data files, right? And so that's another failure that people have, and to fix that, you have to go through the process of, now in 12.1, you can do an alter database data file move and they'll actually move it. Prior to that, people need to go and put the data file offline, move it, and then as you're putting it online, it may force you to do a recovery. And if you're not savvy with the recovery process, that can be quite daunting. Okay. So also on the just like file systems, right? You may run out of space in your disk group, right? Here's another one that's what I call a self-inflicted outage, right? And this is where, from a consulting perspective, right? I tell all my guys, don't set DB recovery file disk size, right? If you're gonna set that, make that the actual size of the disk group. Don't make it, on a 1 terabyte FRA situation, make that 50 gigs, right? And so, because if you do consume 50 gigs for that database, you'll get the archiver stuck message, right? So make sure that you are very careful if you do set DB recovery file disk size, because you're in a heavy SAS environment, for example, that you actually will query the $B flashback logs and maintain monitor that environment to make sure that you don't run out of space. Another thing that I see quite often is standby file management to be manual, especially for customers who don't really add data files very often, right? And so you'll start dealing with unnamed data files on the standby database. So make sure that we set that to automatic, so that if you do add a data file in primary, it automatically will be created as the same data file name, right? Also, very common for us to see still today that they have not applied any PSUs. Okay, so from a data guard success perspective, especially if you're dealing with high transactional volumes, right? Make sure that you have PSUs applied. Okay, obviously, archive log destination being 100% full, but a lot of people don't check the standby site, right? And so make sure on the standby site that you also be monitoring archive destination as well. Another area that we see a lot is when servers get rebooted, right? They'll put in the scripts to restart the databases, but they forget to restart the MRP after a reboot, for example, right? Sys password change is fixed in 12.2 because Oracle will propagate password changes for sys, but prior to, right, you have to go also ship over the password file. Okay, and so that's something to note in prior releases. And now the broker changes have significantly been increased as well to be able to perform switchovers easier and whatnot. But however, right, for customers who leverage OEM, Enterprise Manager, right, Cloud Control, 13C, right, and so a lot of folks will monitor and manage their data guard configurations leveraging OEM. However, right, if you are leveraging OEM, right, it has a strict dependency on the data guard broker, right? And so that means that if you start leveraging the archive desk parameters, right, through the alter system command, right, you can actually cause an inconsistency between what your data guard broker has versus what you've changed your SP file to be. Okay, and when you try to restart your standby, right, you will not be able to start the broker up because it detects inconsistencies between what it thinks it has and what you have on the SP file. So I actually get calls from my friends who are the GUI OEM types, right? So that they set up the entire data guard through OEM, but when they start having these issues, I get calls in the middle of the night, especially from a lot of my friends, colleagues. And so what I asked them to do in this case is that I asked them to go take the broker config, do a strings on it, do a strings on your SP file, send it to me, and I'll actually send them the alter system command to actually synchronize the SP file to match what the broker has, and then everything comes right back up. Okay. Couple more things to consider when it comes to guarantee restore points, right? GRPs, make sure you always do those before you do any kind of maintenance. Right? That includes PSUs, RURs, even database upgrades, right? And so guarantee restore points do not need for you to set up flashbacks. It's purely dependent on archive logs. And so make sure that that you leverage those accordingly. And if you are leveraging no logging on the primary database, right, make sure you monitor your $desk, data file, to check for, data files that need to be propagated over to your standby. But more importantly, what I would suggest is create one tablespace, make it no logging, and force all transactions to go to that tablespace, and then set up another monitoring job that basically checks for no logging activities for all the table spaces, right? Except for that one table space. And if you see it, send an alert. Okay, so these are my common issues that I see quite often, right? If you have more that you want to share, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to add them because it's actually fascinating where we see the common issues that you see all the time across different organizations. So let's talk about monitoring, right? We're talking about monitoring the primary database and standby database. That's really a very important part of what I call bulletproofing your data guard configuration, right? And so make sure you monitor the alert logs in the primary database, but also monitor your standby database or alert logs as well, right? And so the alert log literally has just about everything that the standby database is doing. So monitoring that gives you your first line of defense, right? Also, make sure that you monitor for archive gaps or deviances in your archive logs between your primary database and your standby database, right? But monitoring that, you can actually see how far behind you are from an archive log perspective. But monitoring your transport log is going to be one of your more important things, right? It's monitoring how far am I behind because my wide area network just can't keep up with my workload, right? It just can't ship archive logs fast enough, right? And at the same time, monitor your apply lag. This is seeing an apply lag basically is an indicator that my standby database, from a configuration perspective, from a hardware perspective, is not quite in sync with my primary database and lacks the horsepower that it needs. Okay. And so through OEM Cloud Control, I can actually monitor a lot of these things, right? And this is why it's such a popular deal that a lot of DBs use, right? You can monitor your data guard status. You can actually monitor your transport lag, apply lag, right? Estimated database, rule transition time, right? And then OEM will send alerts, right? So a lot of our managed services customers, we actually do both. We leverage OEM as well as our custom monitoring scripts, right? And we send alerts accordingly, right? So we also need to be proactive in our monitoring, right? Making sure that your file system never runs out of space, or your AS and disk groups never run out of space, right? Our typical recommendation would be send a warning at 80% and send a critical alert at 90%. And different customers want different thresholds, right? And if you are using the DB recovery file desk size, right, make sure you monitor your flashback logs in there accordingly, and your archive logs as well, right? From a general recommendation, PSUs N-1, leverage both OEM and custom monitoring. And if you are have a quarterly testing switchover requirement, make sure that you have all that documented well, so you have a seamless switchover perspective. A lot of our financial customers do have requirements to switch over on a regular basis, right? And so this is again, the same thing I mentioned before, leveraging OEM. You can get a lot of information, a lot of graphical information, right? And this is where it becomes really popular to show upper management. Okay, so like I said before, the SysDG rule is new to 12C, but in this slide, I want to show how you can actually use that to log in through the DataGuard broker, right? So I grant SysDG to a user called dgopper that I also created, and I use dgmgrl with that same role. Okay, so we mentioned before that we have lots of toolkits that's available for you to download, right? And it actually has a lot of those best practices in mind. So you can go to dbaexpert.com/DG for DataGuard, and you can actually see different years as I present at IOUG and different conferences. Each year, I'll actually update the scripts, okay? And so this is something that a lot of people don't seem to know is the what we call the bandwidth delay product, BDP, right? It's a simple algorithm that we for bandwidth times latency times 3, right? And actually derives a BDP, right? And we leverage that BDP to set up our listener and TNS names for wide area network in terms of send and receive buffer sizes, right? So the idea is that I want to send more and less frequent, right, to optimize my wide area network traffic, right? And so the actual bandwidth, you need to know if you're on OC3, DS12, et cetera, right? And you also need to know your latency, right? And so latency is calculated as a round trip response time, right, from your primary to your standby. So when we calculate round trip response time, you can leverage, for example, ping, but specify a packet size, right? And that packet size would be similar to what you're actually sent, what Oracle uses for its packet size. And the response that you get back, you multiply that by your bandwidth. OC3 will have a bandwidth of, let's say, 1.5, 155.0.0.0.0.0.0, and I calculate my BDP to be, in this case, right, 255.7500 as well. And I use that for my listener as well as my TNS, right? And so in the scripts that I have provided that I mentioned before in the DataGuard book, right, there's a script called dg_bdp.ksh, and there's a config file. You actually put in what your numbers are, and we'll actually create you this listener and TNS names for you. All right, so it's a easy way to get started in terms of leveraging a lot of the best practices, and also from an automation perspective, right? All right, so I mentioned before, right, the log archive desk. This is where you want to make sure that you leverage the location to be use DB recovery file desk. And especially if you're using Active Data Guard, one of the key features of Active Data Guard is that in the event that I have a corrupted block on my primary, Oracle will go get the correct block from the Active Data Guard database, and it will actually self-repair its corrupted block, right? To do that, use the location, use DB recovery file desk, okay? Also, always enable flashback database on the primary and standby. A lot of people tend to only do it on one environment, right? And there's also best practices associated with it as well, right? Because people who do have issues with flashback is because they don't specify enough physical storage space for it, right? And so there's a couple of MAA best practices when it comes to flashback, right? And so you set it for 60 minutes if you just need it for flashback reinstantiation. This is one of the recommendations. And if you want to protect yourself from user errors, logical corruptions, and even malicious users, right? Recommendation is 6 hours. This is, remember, just a starting point, right? And so another misconception people have is that if I go from my primary to standby and I fail over, not switch over, but if I fail over, right, I got to rebuild my primary database. That's also not true as well. If you have flashback logging, you can literally flashback your primary database to the actual SCN where you actually started, right before you started your primary database, and you can actually reestablish DataGuard back. All right, so blockchain tracking is a very important aspect of any kind of backup strategy, right? And so BCT should be enabled in every environment. However, a lot of customers want to offload their backups to a standby database. And so if you are one of these customers, make sure that you understand that it does incur an active DataGuard license. Okay, so this is a something that every company wants to do, right? But you can't use blockchain tracking on your DataGuard side, right? So you can query the $V blockchain tracking view and figure out what the status and bytes are on your primary and your standby database. All right, so let's talk about standby redo logs, right? There's a general formula that we use, is that the number of standby redo logs should be the number of my online redo logs plus 1 times my number of threads. So let's say that I have 5 redo logs or ORLs, online redo logs, right? And I'm running a 2-node rack, right? So 5 plus 1 is 6. And so on a 2-node rack, right, I need to have 12 standby redo logs. Okay. Also, as best practices, right, make sure you create your standby redo logs on both primary database as well as your standby database. And so again, the DG toolkit that I mentioned before has a script called DG generate standby redo shell. It will actually go inspect your primary database, look at number of threads that you got, look at number of online redo logs, and it'll actually go create you the standby redo for syntax for both your primary and your standby database. Okay, mentioned before, forced logging, right? Best practice is to do it at the database level. However, if you are going to do it at the tablespace level, especially in data warehouse environments, right, make sure you specify one tablespace to be no logging and force all no logging transactions to and tables to go there as well. All right. So also there's numerous scripts that my DG toolkit provides to be able to monitor for forced logging as well as unrecoverable activities, so I can propagate data files accordingly. You should always know your archive generation rates. Okay, so it's imperative that if you have your RPO and RTO, okay, RPO is basically the concept of how much data can I afford to lose, right? And RTO is how much time do I have before I have to get my DR side up, right? So understanding your RPO and RTO is critical as you define your wide area network, and also looking at your workload in primary database to see if I can actually achieve that, right? So if you look at this example, right, I'm generating literally, right, 25 archive logs, 23 archive logs, 20 archive logs on February the 23rd, right? And basically, if I'm sitting there and I'm generating this amount of archive logs, right, when I'm sitting, come to work at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, right, most likely I will be, hypothetically, right, 5 to 6 hours behind in terms of it being able to ship all that to my DR site, right? But if I have an RPO of only 4 hours, I just blew it right there of potentially 4 hours of data loss, right? And so as a a database administrator architect, make sure we understand that. Okay, and here's a script that derived that information, and if you want a copy of it, you can actually figure this out to calculate the rest. But if you want a copy of it, it's also there as well in the DG Toolkit. So, okay, I'm going to talk about one more thing, and we'll end it here. A lot of DBAs, I get surprised, don't know the concept of a image copy backup, right? And that's very important, especially if you're dealing with very large databases. So customers who have multi-terabyte databases, now we're in the world of petabytes now, right? How can you back up a 500 terabyte database every week, right? A general backup strategy that every company has is, I do full level 0 on the weekend, and I do incrementals throughout the day, right? But now if I have a 500 terabyte database, how can I back up my 500 terabyte database in a timely manner, right? So and this is a 10G feature that they came out with, and it's called incrementals forever, right? So idea is that take a image copy. This is like the way that we used to do backups back in the old days, right? Put the entire database in backup mode, or one tablespace at a time in backup mode, copy the data files, right? So that's like an equivalent to an image copy, right? So I take an image copy. The cool thing is that Oracle doesn't put databases in backup mode while it's doing it, right? And then from that point on, right, I take incrementals forever, meaning that I take level 1 backups going forward from there. And I simply take the level 1 backups and I literally apply them to my image copy backup. And so my image copy backup is always going to be in sync with my primary database. It's just going to be n-1 incremental backup behind, right? But the cool thing is that because I do a image copy, right? I can actually, it's an actual copy of the database, which means that I can actually do a switchover to my image copy in the event that my primary database dies, right? And it's actually a single command called switch database to copy, right? And so I can actually have a whole new level of protection on my primary database before I even have to fail over, right? And so a general recommendation that I give a lot of our customers is that don't apply your incremental from the previous night until the next day, right? That gives you a 24-hour window of protection, right? That I can literally go and switch data file to copy, switch tablespace to copy, and literally roll forward with my archive logs and have a point in time protection on my primary database, right? Also, by leveraging snapshot technologies that are available in just about every storage array now, right? I can go and go back in time for my image copy as well. And so this screen depicts a lot of the commands that's available to do an image copy backup, right? So if you look at the very far left bottom box, right, we use the command backup as copy, not as backup set, right? And then the incremental backup commands that you see in the middle of the triangle, recover copy database, and then I'll say backup incremental level 1 for recover of copy, and then top of that I'll back up the archive logs, right? And so if you go and leverage EMC, for example, right, you can do snapshots and do clones off of it as well, right? So it has a lot of use cases that for image copy backups. All right, so also again, on my dbexpert.com, I actually provide a complete, just about everything you can think of from an RMAN backup and recovery perspective, right? So in this example, I even give you the cron job equivalent, right, to be able to perform, backups at backups, compressed backups at backups, image copy backups, and doing incrementals as well. And so, and the scripts is comprised of numerous scripts that make it up. When I first wrote this back in early 2000, my single script was over 100K, and my boss came to me and said, "You know what, Charles? No one's going to support your script." And so I actually decomposed that and made it more modular, so that anybody can modify a single component of it, and it's all about ease of use and ease of maintenance. right? And so, and like I said, I kind of lied a little bit, but this will be my last screen. But as part of the Data Guard Toolkit, comes with a comprehensive set of menus that we've built to be able to check on the preliminary steps to build a standby database. We have another set of submenus to build a standby database, to build a data guard broker configuration. If you look at option 40, to monitor the physical standby, to be able to set it up leveraging FarSync. I left the logical standby there for backward support, to be able to leverage the automatic diagnostic repository, ADR, to be able to maintain your ADR. There's a lot of syntax in there that automates that process. A whole set of menus on backing up your database to disk, and also there's a step-by-step scripts that it provides you. Like I mentioned before, a lot of DBAs do have a misconception that if you do lose archive logs, that you have to rebuild your standby. That's quite not true. And so option number 200 will provide you the syntax to be able to back up the primary database based on SCN and how to roll forward as well. There's another step that it does for you. There's a hidden option, and it's basically a duplicate database that it creates, but it's extremely comprehensive, and it basically has everything that you need to build your standby database from a single command. And so I will stop there. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I thank you for your time, and look forward to the next presentation that I'm doing with you guys in the future. Right? Thanks again. Signing off.